Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful September night. My name is Lissa Muscatine. I'm one of the co-owners of Politics and Prose bookstore. I hope many of you visited us up on Connecticut Avenue. Yes? Great, thank you. And we are really appreciate being here at Sixth and I tonight. We have a wonderful partnership with Sixth and I. Esther Foer is one of our great collaborators and partners and the force behind the success of this wonderful, incredible institution. And normally she talks a little bit about Sixth and I and what it represents to the community, but I just want to say, since she's not speaking tonight, thank you, Esther, for all that you do and that your staff, Jackie and others do to bring and vitalize the culture of Washington, D.C. So give a hand, please, to the Sixth and I crowd. It's just such a pleasure for me to introduce two extraordinary women tonight and two extraordinary voices in our nation's public life. Our guest of honor is a mother of two, a wife, a lawyer, a Sunday school teacher, community volunteer, former Democratic representative from the 20th District of New York, and of course now United States Senator from New York in her second term. But that's not all. As of 2 days ago, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand has added a new title to her resume: author. Senator Gillibrand's new book is called Off the Sidelines, Raise Your Voice, Change the World. It's part memoir, part call to action, part inspirational guidebook for women doing the great balancing act of modern life, and by the way, for men too, it's a great book, so just want to say that to be sure. The title comes in part from the wonderful online book group that Senator Gillibrand has convened, in which women across the country join together to discuss a book every few months and share ideas about how they can use their voices to affect change in their communities and beyond. Off the Sidelines, the book charts Senator Gillibrand's own journey from a family with generations of formidable women to her career as a lawyer, to her role as a wife and mother, and of course, she talks about a seminal moment that motivated her to launch herself into elective politics. Her energy, determination, and resilience, whether bringing her sons with her to peek into the Senate floor while she's voting or taking on the military brass on the issue of sexual assaults, have quickly made her a respected, influential, and extremely refreshing voice on Capitol Hill. Senator, I just want to say that your candor and your humor and your sense of possibility are so evident in your book and so welcome in this town, and I want to thank you for being such an inspiration to so many of us. It's a great, great book, and I hope you all will read it. It's believe it or not, it's a political book, but it's actually a page-turner. It's a really fun read. In conversation tonight with Senator Gillibrand is a friend and longtime customer at Politics and Prose, Andrea Mitchell, who is probably better known to most of you, however, and most of America for her prize-winning reporting on NBC News. She's host of Andrea Mitchell Reports, a daily show on MSNBC that explores the most important issues of the day, from crises around the globe to crises in our country, and especially she's focused some really important attention on challenges facing women. To borrow a line and a concept from Senator Gillibrand's brand and from her book, which if you read it, you'll see that she talks about this, she urges us to stop talking about having it all and to think instead about doing it all. And I just want to say that if anybody has done it all in journalism, it is Andrea Mitchell. So thank your incredible career and great inspiration as well. And in case you're wondering, both of these women have done the ultimate, and that is the Ice Bucket Challenge. So please join me in welcoming Andrea Mitchell and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Thank you so much, Lissa. And I can't tell you what a thrill to be back here at Sixth and I and to be with Kirsten Gillibrand because, well, the book it's inspirational, it's funny, it's personal. I don't know if you saw Jon Stewart last night, but you can find it online. It was great. He was obviously really interested in finding out, what is the challenge and why are many men on the Hill, frankly, and in other workplaces, I'm sure, including my own at times, why are men so incredibly stupid and boorish? And unreconstructed. And
I was wondering what word you were going to choose. I was like, which one is she going to pick?
Not the one that was bleeped out of the
No.
by Jon Stewart. And then I was fortunate to have the senator on today, and we got so, I don't know, I got so taken up in all of her answers that I don't think I asked very many questions. It was just so much fun to have you on. So thank you all for being here. And I know that you offer empowerment and encouragement to women of all ages. And particularly, I was very struck today when you talked about young, less powerful women. You're a United States Senator, so you can take some of it. We can all absorb it. I can absorb it. But for women in their first jobs, for interns, you know, how do they cope with male behavior that is patronizing at a minimum, and is often offensive and all the way up to being, you know, blatantly illegal?
Right. Well, the reason why I wrote these stories, I included stories from my young career days. I told stories about my mother and my grandmother as, you know, women who marked their own way. They did their own things because I wanted to give the reader a chance to see themselves in each of these stories. And when you talk about someone saying something inappropriate to you, it really is undermining, particularly when you're young and you don't necessarily have the tools or know what to do in that circumstance. And I shared one story when I was a young lawyer. And I had been working so hard on this case, months after months, canceled vacations, worked all weekend, and we're having a celebratory dinner of all the team members, and the partner gets up to congratulate us, and I'm running the case for him. And so he says, and I want to thank Kirsten for all her hard work, but don't you just love her haircut? She looks so good these days. My mouth was open. I was dying inside. I'm thinking, I can't believe you're commenting on my hair. I just worked my butt off for you for months and months, and you're not recognizing me for my work. So for a young person in the beginning of her career, that is so undermining. It hurts. It makes you feel like you don't have value. It makes you feel like the work you've done has gone unnoticed. And so my advice to that young woman, myself, is you push through it, you work hard, and someday you might be that guy's boss. And that is a good thing. And when you are, you can change the climate. You can change how people treat each other and insist on something very different.
You write in the book, I got called a parakeet with no original thoughts, a cipher, a Chuck Schumer puppet, whatever that is. I was nicknamed Tracy Flick, the aggressive, comical, and somewhat unhinged blonde high school student played by Reese Witherspoon in the movie Election.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I share these particular stories is because I wanted to illustrate the broader challenge that all women face in the workplace. And, you know, when we look around, Andrea, the face of the workforce has really changed. 8 out of 10 families, moms are working. 4 out of 10 families, moms are the sole or primary breadwinners. But a lot of our workplace rules are really stuck in the Mad Men era. They're really stuck at the time when dads went to work, moms stayed at home. And so even simple supports like paid leave or equal pay, we don't even have in this country. And it goes to this overall and overarching themes of, do we value women? Are we valuing all they have to offer? I love Geraldine Ferraro's quote when she was the vice presidential nominee, and she says, it's not what America can do for women, it's what women can do for America. And that really sums up what I think this book's about. It's about our voices, how important they are, how our worldview and life experiences are different, and if we share our opinions and share our views and fight for the things that we care about, outcomes will be different and better.
One of the stories you share is when you were first elected and you had just had Henry. There you are, a senator, you're a junior senator, you're assigned to preside over the Senate, which means, you know, being out there on C-SPAN and for all the world to see, and you had to breastfeed. And there was some young male aide who just said, no, nobody else can do this. And until Senator Mark Udall and other freshmen bailed you out, you were in trouble.
It's so funny. So for those of you who are too young yet to have children or who are men, you won't really understand this. But for those of you who have nursed a baby, you do know when it's the time to nurse, you need to nurse. It's something that has to happen. And it's extremely uncomfortable if it doesn't. And I couldn't bear describing this to a 20-something-year-old aide. And so I just decided I'm going to solve this problem on my own, because I urged him, can I please just have a morning time or a daytime? Or And he was like, no, you do what you're told, basically. So I worked it out. I called a bunch of senators and found one, Mark Udall, who I call my white knight of presiding orders. And and I described to him that I really needed to be with the baby during those hours. Could I switch with him? And of course he said yes. But, that's a lot of our workplaces don't even realize why their policies affect women negatively. And one of the things that we talk about is this having it all debate. And what I found is my life is challenging. I have real challenges, similar experiences to a lot of moms. How do you get the kids fed in the morning, make their lunches, find the soccer uniform, and get out the door on time? It's very common. But my job has flexibility. And so if I have a sick child, I can bring Henry or Theo to work. If I have to get to a parent-teacher meeting, I can cancel my meetings during that time. I have flexibility. But the woman who's going to clean the synagogue, the woman who is working at the grocery store, somebody working double shifts at the emergency room, they work the hours they're told to work, and they have no flexibility. And if their child's sick, if they don't have sick days, there's nothing they can do about it. And so if they go and meet those needs of that child, they may well be fired. And so those are some of the stories and challenges that we really need to talk about.
Talk a bit about your transition when you, corporate lawyer, Dartmouth educated, then law school, typical smart Ivy League graduate. What made you decide to get into this political fray?
Well, I mentioned I had some pretty cool role models, and one of them was my grandmother. And now my grandmother was this salty figure. She had a terrible mouth, swore all the time. She never went to college, and she worked her whole life. She was a secretary in our state legislature in Albany. And being in the legislature in the early 1920s and 30s, obviously, women had very little power. They tended to be the behind-the-scenes, electeds were men. But she had this notion that her voice was important, and she had this view that she wanted to be heard on things that they were working on. So what she realized is if she could amplify her voice by engaging other women, they could make a difference. And so she started a local women's Democratic Club. They became essential to every campaign. They did all the work, all the door-to-door, envelope stuffing, phone banking. And over time, they became powerful because you couldn't get elected in Albany if you didn't have the help of my grandmother and her friends. So I learned at her knee how important women's voices are and how important grassroots activism is and what you do with your time. And so I always had in the back of my mind I wanted to do something in public service, something in government. And as I got older, I became more fearful of that. I was almost embarrassed to admit I wanted to run for office someday.
And how hard was it to make that decision?
It was interesting. So I'm a young lawyer working at a big law firm in New York City, pushing paper, and I look up long enough to notice that Hillary Clinton's giving this speech in China. Now, I had been an Asian studies major at Dartmouth. I had studied Mandarin in Beijing, so I knew how powerful it was for our First Lady to give this speech about women's rights in Beijing to the world. And I just kicked myself because I didn't know about the conference. I wasn't invited to the conference. I wasn't participating in this national and worldwide conversation. And I thought, I need to get involved in politics. So I called a friend whose mom was involved, and she said, join a women's group in New York City, the Women's Leadership Forum. I join. I go to my first meeting. I have to pay $1,000 to join. Now, that was a lot of money. That was my rent check back then. But that's the only advice I was given, so I did it. I go to this fancy party, and Hillary's our speaker, and she's looking out into the audience, and there's about 100 women, and I'm by far the youngest by about 10 or 20 years. And I feel like she's talking straight to me, and she says, decisions are being made every day in Washington, and if you are not part of those decisions and you don't like what they decide, you have no one to blame but yourself. And I'm standing there in the back of the room and sweating because I'm thinking, she's talking to me, she's talking to me. I have to do something about it. And I really felt like she had zeroed into my core, and I felt like this is my moment. I have to get involved in politics.
It's so interesting that you should say that, because when I read that in the book, I was there in Beijing as a reporter covering Hillary Clinton, and the pressure from the male foreign policy establishment, White House, State Department, against the First Lady making news on a foreign trip in Beijing, no less. And there was so much hostility also against the whole delegation. Tom Kean, the then governor, former governor of New Jersey, and later the 9/11 Commission co-chair, was the only male in the delegation. And it was a lot of women, Madeleine Albright, obviously with her, and it was just a really tough moment for her, and she just stood up there and did it.
It was transformative, and it showed so much courage and leadership. And I was just amazed. And so Hillary's always been for me a role model. She's been someone I've looked to see, she's really making a difference. And a lot of times as young women we think, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. I'm not a Hillary Clinton. I couldn't. But we don't have to be. What we have to realize is that our voices matter no matter where we raise them. It doesn't matter if you're, talking about a school board or the PTA or your local community or having a community garden or doing a book drive for at-risk kids in your neighborhood. Your voice and life perspective is real and different and is absent in so many places. A lot of women will say, oh, I'm sure someone's dealing with that. I'm sure someone's fixing that. Probably not. Probably no one is doing that or fixing that. And it might be you as the only person in the right place at the right time to make the difference. And that's really what the book's about, that every woman's voice matters. And it doesn't matter if you're on the national stage like Hillary or if you are doing not-for-profit work at your church.
How important are role models, powerful role models for women, such as having a woman in the Oval Office?
I think it's essential. I think having a woman to look up to is so valuable. And also mentors are important. Mentoring moments pop up all the time, and they don't have to be long, well-developed relationships. I remember I had one woman working for me. Her name was Rain Henderson. And she, funny, I'm a lawyer, so when I run my first campaign, the first person I hire is a policy director. If any of you know anything about campaigns, you really never hire a policy director. But I felt I needed one. So I hired Rain, and so she helped me in my first congressional campaign figure out all my positions. And right before the end of the election, she had an offer to go work for CGI, to work for Bill. She said, my dream is to work for Bill Clinton. I said, okay. So she tells me about this job she's interviewing for, and she said, I'm applying for the number 2 or 3 job. And I said, well, who's your boss? And she says, oh, they haven't hired a boss yet. I was like, they haven't hired that person. I was like, well, why aren't you applying for that job? And she said, oh, I'm not qualified. I couldn't run that. It was a division for childhood obesity. I said, Rain, you know everything about childhood obesity. You have your degrees in health. You know everything. And I said, you have to apply for that top job. And she said, really? I said, of course. Sure enough, she applies for it. She gets it. And that was just a small mentoring moment. It didn't take anything from me. I needed to give her that encouragement. But sometimes that's all it takes. And so I want all women to find one person, and men to find one person to mentor. Find a young woman who's somewhere in her career on her way that you've already achieved, and give her that little bit of advice she might need. It is worth so much, and Hillary was always giving me that. I was able to call her in my first campaign to look at a poll, to give me advice. She gives me her 2 minutes every time I need just a little bit of reassurance. When I did run, she came to the district, she went to big events, she held fundraisers, she did everything. But we should all seek out to be mentors and to find mentors and to be role models for each other.
What's the difference, the distinction that you make between mentoring and sponsoring?
So this is sort of a corporate America thing, but in a law firm, for example, or if you're on the ladder in a corporation, you need more than mentors, because a mentor just gives you good advice. They'll just tell you, based on their life experience, something you should or shouldn't do. But a sponsor is someone who links their future to yours. A sponsor is someone who says, I'm going to make sure you make partner. And if you're going to make partner, you're going to have to work on these 3 cases, and you need to do this, that. And they really believe in you so much that if you don't succeed, they don't succeed. And frankly, it's essential in a big company or in a law firm to have that sponsor. I never had one in a law firm, and I didn't even know I needed one. But really, it is necessary, and it's helpful. And interestingly, no sponsor is going to pick you. You really have to pick them, and you have to earn their support. A sponsor is eventually going to choose to sponsor you because you've already jumped through 20 hoops, done a great job, stayed late, proved yourself. They don't just happen. You often have to really earn a sponsor.
What gives a male congressman or senator the entitlement to feel that they can comment on a senator's appearance and say, you look porky, or don't lose too much weight. I like,
my girl's chubby.
My girl's chubby. Yeah. I mean, what gives them the
Or
idea
when I'm 8 months pregnant, walking out around in the House of Representatives, Kirsten, you're even pretty when you're fat. I'm a pregnant lady. Being pregnant is not the same, and you should be nice to pregnant ladies. But, but for me, those comments didn't affect me because, these kind of things happen all the time. And honestly, they happen in all industries. They happen at every stage in your career. And I use those specific examples to illustrate this broader challenge of what do women face in the workplace, and why is it that there is this sticky floor. This is of course we have to break the highest glass ceiling, but there are impediments and challenges that continually bring women back down to lower wage jobs, less responsibility, and less opportunity for promotion. And it happens because we have no support. So for example, when you have a new baby, when you have a child who becomes very ill or gets hit by a car and you need to care for the child, when your mother's dying and you need to be home with her or she needs 24/7 care, for most women, when that family emergency happens, they will ramp off their careers. They will either quit, they will reduce their hours, they will change industries, they will do something so that they have the flexibility they need it when they need it. But we are the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have paid leave. It's outrageous. And so what happens is, although women are earning more than half of the college degrees, more than half of the advanced degrees, we are not reaching our full potential in the economy or in the workplace because we don't have the support we need for all the things we do for our families. And that's the larger challenge. And so any one illustration, it's really just a touch point for these broader themes and elevating the debate about how can we support women more in the workplace.
The Senate, when I covered the Senate in the late 80s, early 90s, before I was covering the Bill Clinton campaign, and there were certain senators that you would know to stay away from or not get in an elevator with or not let your interns go near. I mean, they were legendary. I don't know if the place is still
I
the
don't
same.
think the Senate is unique. I think this is in all industries across all places, but some of it may well be generational. But stupid statements are made all the time, and statements in different industries have different impacts. So I write about these examples in a chapter about appearance. And the reason why I focused a whole chapter on it is because different industries have different requirements, and different industries have a different impact for a woman and her appearance. And there's studies in politics that when an opponent talks about a woman's appearance, it really undermines her in the campaign. And it doesn't matter if the comments are positive or negative. Anything about a woman's appearance undermines her credibility. So in my first campaign for Congress in 2006, my opponent first started out, oh, she's just a pretty face, intimating that I was too stupid to be a member of Congress. But then for his mailers, he found the ugliest picture he could of me. He tinted the mailers green so I looked a little bit like a witch, so I could be this crazed woman that you couldn't possibly trust with any power. So he used it at both sides of the coin. He used both the positive and the negative to try to knock down my credibility. And so the advice that I give in the chapter is, know your industry, know the rules of the road for it, but then make your own decisions. If you want to wear whatever clothes you want to wear, you should wear whatever clothes you want to wear. And some women have reached a point in their career where they really aren't going to concern themselves. And I love what Hillary Clinton says about this. She said, if I'm going to wear my glasses, I'm going to wear my glasses. If I'm going to put my hair in a ponytail, I'm going to put my hair in a ponytail. I'm not going to spend time thinking about it. And I am not quite there yet. I go with the, conservative black suits, the navy blue suits, let's keep it simple and no distractions. But women need to know how they will be judged, and then they can make their own decisions.
This horrible, horrible issue of the NFL is getting so much attention right now, not just because the video is so disgusting, but because the basic line is, Ray Rice acknowledged that he punched his wife.
Yeah.
You don't need a picture to say what the next step should do. How have we come to the point where an industry as powerful as the NFL, and I'm a huge football fan myself, can get away with this? Perhaps they won't, but the victimization of women and the pathology of women themselves who feel, because of economic or other reasons or concerns about a child or other bonds or love, who feel that they cannot break away and acknowledge the way they've been abused.
I think it's a complete failure by the NFL. There were no facts in dispute. He admitted to beating his wife. You saw the video of him dragging her out of the elevator. There was nothing left to be known. He should have been fired immediately. And I think it was disgraceful how they handled it. But it's emblematic of a larger problem. There is an institutional bias that's cross-culture, cross-arenas. So you have the NFL protecting their star football player. In the Department of Defense and in the military, you have commanders protecting their favorite soldier or favorite man in the unit. In college campuses, again, the kid on the football team, the star young student. And it is an institutional bias to protect their own, to undermine transparency and accountability for their own benefit. But overwhelmingly, it's about how little we are valuing women. And you will see over and over in these kinds of sexual assault cases how women are doubted, they are disbelieved, they are told it was their own fault. And in some of these cases, they are retaliated against because they disclose what happened. And I had two very brave women come to my office saying we'd like to meet with the senator, and my team made sure I got to meet with them. And these two women, Annie and Andrea, told me these stories about how they were both raped on campus. They reported the rapes. The school didn't believe them. They blamed them, and then they retaliated against them. And these two girls were so brave, they said, we are not letting this stand. They started a movement. They went college to college, campus to campus, recruited other men and women who suffered the same. They have now created a nationwide advocacy network to deal with sexual assault on college campuses. They are working with senators on writing legislation. Legislation will be passed in this Senate. And they will make a difference. And so the message of the book is really that any one person can change outcomes. Any one person, if she's willing to stand up, tell her story, fight for what she believes in, she can change outcomes and make them better.
You were frustrated on the subject of outside prosecutors handling the rape cases in the military. What is the prospect for that, for changing that, given that you were up against the military brass, some of your own colleagues, the chair of the
the status quo.
Committee?
The status quo is sometimes the hardest thing to fight against. So we have this challenge in the military. Last year, there were 26,000 cases of sexual assault, rape, and unwanted sexual contact, but only about 3,000 reported the crimes. That's 1 in 10. And when you talk to the survivors, they say, the reason why I didn't report is I didn't trust the chain of command. I didn't believe justice was possible, and when I tried to report or when I was told it was my own fault and nothing would be done. So the stories are consistent. For the 1 out of 10 who did report, 62% were retaliated against for reporting the crime. So that's what we're up against. And you're talking about a military who has since tailhook, zero tolerance for sexual assault. More than half the victims are men. GQ, by the way, did an article today about male survivors of sexual assault in the military. It is so heartbreaking, but I urge you to read it. This battle is not over, Andrea. We will win it. It will take time. We only need 5 more votes. And with time, we will have more facts. We will have more survivors come forward. And we have the veterans community with us. We have veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. We have veterans from all different eras. And we have generals and admirals and very high-ranking officers who are all retired supporting our bill. This is not something that's not supported by people who know. And if you just listen to the survivors, if you just believe the victims, they're telling you what you need to do. But it's that constant undermining and lack of value for women, for their voices and what they're saying. And that's why this call to action, to me, is so important.
And in that regard, the message that you want younger women and other women to have about the passion of your work and about engagement and involvement, despite all the obstacles, despite all the frustrations of public life and of politics today and the gridlock?
It's that their voice matters. My mom lived a very different life. She was only one of 3 women in her law school class. She wanted to be a hands-on present mom, always baking, always cooking. I remember her with her phone in one hand, filing some details of an adoption case while she's cooking dinner and sweeping the floor at the same time. And the reason why she was such a role model for me was she was different. She decided, I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it. By the time she was my age, she was a second-degree black belt. How many mothers do you know try to get a second-degree black belt? None. And so I watched her just do what she wanted to do. And that gave me the confidence that it's okay for me to be different. It's okay for me to find my own way. And that's the message I want to give to all women. I want women and young girls to know that they can be exactly themselves, that ambition is not a dirty word. They can dream and want to do anything they set their minds to, and not be afraid to try to achieve it, and not be afraid to fail. You know, one of the lessons of the book is failure is instructive. Just because we lost that vote on sexual assault in the military, it doesn't mean we're going to lose that battle long term. I now know what my opponents say about it. I know now what they think their best arguments are, and I know now how to defeat them. So don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to reach for big things, and ambition's not a bad word.
Well, you've said it all. Kirsten Gillibrand, Off the Sidelines. It really is inspirational. It's a deeply personal and funny and truly instructive book. Thank you so much. Let me just explain. I have this little job where I have to cover the speech and have to be on the air by 8 o'clock on Capitol Hill because the president's giving a speech tonight. And so the senator has kindly agreed to be flexible about all of this. So you're going to have a chance to ask your questions, but I won't be. Unfortunately,
she's got to
I'm
go
gonna
cover
have
the
to
press.
go to do this thing, but
Go deal with
thank you.
ISIL, please.
Yes, I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you later.
Thank you all so much.
So now we're going to take questions from the audience. So just stand up and come up to the microphone, ask away.
Yeah, come to the mics, and then everybody can hear your question. Thanks.
I don't know if everybody's hearing will be a good thing. So you talked a lot about women in violence, and I'm a domestic violence survivor, to where I spent 2.5 years with an abusive boyfriend, and it went to the point where the DA even refused to prosecute because the final episode started because I reached for a bag of items that he stole from me. And that was I caused it from the district attorney, female district attorney. And it's unpublished, but I have a book I've written about it, and it's half fiction, half nonfiction, which publishers have no idea what to do with that. But my question to you is actually, I'm looking for ways I can get involved because it's an issue I care deeply about. And as much as I think that everybody knows how to help a friend who's been raped in terms of all the things that they should do, nobody knows how to help somebody who has an abusive partner. And it's more prevalent, and it's more in the shadows. What would you recommend?
Well, I would definitely work with some of the women's groups that are in the city. There's a number of shelters specifically for women trying to recover from domestic violence, from abuse, from drug addiction. And I think it's called N Street Village, it's very close to here. I watched a documentary about these women, and the saddest story was that almost every woman that had ended up homeless after drug addiction, after losing everything, her children, her family, her home, almost every single one started with sexual violence, being raped when they're 8 years old, being raped by a group of kids in high school. I mean, it's always starting with violence. And women lose their self-esteem, they lose their trust, they look for strength anywhere, whether it's through alcohol or drugs or risky behavior, and they cannot recover. And when you are violated at the hands of someone you love, when you are abused by somebody you trust, it undermines your sense of security, your sense of self, your sense of what's right and wrong. And I hear this over and over, the trauma that's faced by someone who is abused by someone they love or trust, it is devastating. And so in the military context, when you're abused by someone in your chain of command or a brother you were fighting with in Iraq, you don't know how to recover. And one woman said, it's like being raped by your brother and having your father decide the case. She has nowhere to go. And it undermines your whole sense of possibility and hope for the future. And so the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress that women and men are facing, which sounds like the same thing you had to go through and recover from, it's life-altering, and it takes every bit of help from a very good therapist to a nurturing environment and a safe environment to recover, and it takes years. So I would go work for N Street Village. I would seek out some veterans groups that need help, because a lot of the men and women who are coming home are suffering from very severe trauma because of sexual abuse. And the suicide rate is unbelievably high. There's 11 suicides in the military every day.
Is that E-N-D, N Street?
The letter N, yeah. But my office can find some more great organizations here, but
I know of House of Ruth, and I'm in contact with them for the past 7 years. So if anybody needs them, House of
I
Ruth
think
is
just
great.
being able to offer empathy and understanding and being knowledgeable about the trauma is invaluable. And frankly, that's not what's present on so many college campuses. So the people who are there to help these young women and men, they aren't trained, they don't know what to ask, and they blame the victim. So. And the DA's offices aren't much better. So, this debate about, well, these are crimes, why aren't you going to the local DA? Well, a lot of women do, and they are not either laughed out of the police station or blamed or told it was their own fault, and cases are dropped. So we have a huge societal problem, and it really goes to, do we value women enough? And we really don't. We still only pay women 77 cents on the dollar. We do not value women enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here and answering questions. You said yourself that you had an interest in public service from a young age, thanks in part to your grandmother's fierce leadership. But it took you many years to admit that to yourself and to say it out loud to others.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, what do you think some steps are that we can actually take so that for young girls and for young women, it's okay to say, I'm interested in politics, I will run for office someday, not just, I'm thinking about it, or maybe, or that's not something I want to do.
Yeah.
How can we kind of move that conversation forward so it's okay, as you were saying, for women to have that ambition?
Well, I don't know the answer, but there was a study done by American University, and it showed that women rarely had ambition to be in elected office. So they asked women and girls at all different ages, do you see yourself as a mayor? Could you be president someday? Would you ever run for Congress? And overwhelmingly, it was no, 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 no among the women, and yes, 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 yes among the men. The only group that had an aspiration to be in public life were people who were involved in competitive sports. So maybe just keep all your girls in sports, and maybe they'll be more willing to get in the game. And I think it has to do with the notion of being not afraid of failure. When you play a competitive sport, you win some, you lose some. You learn really early on, just because you lose, it doesn't mean you don't get back on the field and play hard the next time. And so I think having girls play sports is very helpful, because you're not afraid of failure and you learn to compete. And so in a political context, a lot of women will say, I don't want to run for office. I hate the negative ads. It's too mean. It's too aggressive. It's too nasty. It's so dirty. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to put my family into that. But if you say to that woman, well, that's all true, but it's not about you. It's about what you're fighting for. It's about the cause that you think is so important. And frankly, you're the only one who cares about that cause. And if you don't run, no one's going to address global climate change, or no one's going to address childhood obesity, or whatever her passion is. And you're exactly the right person who could beat this guy. So if you run, you can make the difference. And they'll say, oh, really? I can make it? Yes, you could make the difference. And you're the only one who can make. She will respond. Women respond when they are needed, and women respond when they are told that they can do it. And I liken this whole call to action to what Rosie the Riveter was during World War II. Just an iconic poster, woman with her sleeves rolled up, slogan, we can do it. But women responded. 6 million women entered the workforce because of that campaign. And they did because they were told they were needed, and they were told they could do it. We need 6 million more women voting, holding elected leaders accountable, and hopefully running for office. So we have to tell our girls that they're needed. We have to tell our women that their voices are unique and important, and that without their voice and perspective, the country's lesser off because of it.
Senator, I have a question about the undermining comments that you talked about earlier. I work on justice issues in Latin America, and frankly, that happens quite a lot. And I find it difficult to figure out how to react to that. So in your experience, did you speak out about it? And if so, how? Because I don't want that to create a backlash either.
You have to make your own decision based on the circumstances you're in, what role you play in that office, who made the comments. Obviously, if someone's really sexually harassing you, you do need to report it to someone you trust in your office, because that is unacceptable and illegal. Someone saying, nice ass, yeah, thanks, jerk, like, it doesn't need a response. It's so idiotic, it's so stupid, it's so inappropriate. So, when I'm a member of Congress and, some congressman who is old and I don't know him and he's weird and he says to me, "Good thing you're working out, you wouldn't want to get porky," I'm thinking to myself, "Thanks, asshole. I don't need your advice." So sometimes it merits a response, sometimes it doesn't. Every woman should make her own decision. But it does undermine us. And those were conversations with peers. They weren't my bosses. They had no say over me. It didn't bother me. I went home and I told my husband and we laughed. But when I was told in that law firm situation as a young 20-something lawyer that you look so great after I'd worked my butt off, that hurt. And I was so disappointed. And I thought that would have really hurt my career if anybody was in that room who didn't know me well and didn't watch me work so hard for so many years. That would have undermined me if there were 2 or 3 other partners there who hadn't worked with me. They would have made the judgment, she's a lightweight. She's got nothing to offer. That would have crushed my future possibility, I think. And so women have to be vigilant, and you have to figure out, do I need to address it or don't I? Is this going to hurt my career? If so, how do I fix it? Do I go right to the partner and say something to him myself? Do I have another partner say something to him like that really wasn't good? You have to figure it out. And you cannot know, unless you're in that woman's shoes, what's the best course. But my advice is don't let it get you down, because that happens in all industries all the time, and it does not mean you are not worth every bit that you think you are. And that's really the message, particularly for younger women, because it's deflating. It really hurts.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. An industry which hasn't been kind to women, and this is verified by recent surveys, is the technology industry, based largely in the Silicon Valley. Surveys have shown that these are male-dominated, and they hire very few, scandalously few minorities. What can be done to change that? What can government do, or how can women change to fit into these kind of jobs?
Well, one example are jobs that require proficiency in science, technology, engineering, and math. Those are the STEM fields. And those 8 out of 9 of the fastest growing industries require proficiency in STEM. And if women and minorities aren't going into science, technology, and math, what it means is they're not going to have opportunities in those fast-growing industries. We're also not going to have the benefit of their brilliance and their smarts and their innovation in those industries where we want all our brightest minds. So what a lot of people who study this say is you've got to go and get those kids early. You've got to inspire the 3rd grader with how to build a rocket and the 5th grader with how to build a robot, and teach them about hands-on learning, and tell young girls that their ideas are important. And I use an example in the book about Henry in his pre-K class. Now, my son Henry loves trains, and so I walk into his daycare and he's playing trains with his favorite friend at the time, and her name was Sadie. And Sadie, of course, as the young girl, is putting people along the tracks and talking about where the people are going and what they're doing, and very typical. And but what I realized at that moment is, yes, boys often want to build things and break things and build things and things with wheels, things that go fast. But Sadie's interests were just as important, because if she's interested in where the people are going and what the people are doing, imagine what kind of engineer she would be. She would design a train system that actually met the needs of the people and concerned herself with where the people were going and what they needed to do. So I want Sadie to be as interested in science, technology, and math, because I want her brilliance as a city planner. So we have to just teach our girls, you can help people. Being concerned about what people think and do is important, and not to lose sight that these industries need them too.
Great answer.
Thank you.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Okay. 1, 2, sorry guys.
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
I feel really lucky. So I'm from the burbs, and I had a pretty cushy, life coming up, and I didn't know a lot of people who had served in the military. And you talked about the scourge of sexual assault in the military that you're trying to address, which I think is great. But I don't know a lot about the military, and so when I hear that Senator Barbara McCaskill out of Missouri sort of seems to have a different approach to solving the problem than your proposed solution, I don't really come at it with a lot of expertise. So I was wondering if you could sort of address that contrast.
Well, women agree on a lot of things, but we are not a monolith, and we disagree on many things too. But Claire and I agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And in fact, now we're working hand in glove on the sexual assault on college campuses issue. So I still think the way the women in the Senate work is really special. Women in the Senate, we have a quarterly dinner. We get together. Barbara Mikulski, when she was a senator, and there was finally 2, she said, I'm going to start having a caucus meeting. So the 2 women, the 2 women started having dinner. And she's kept that tradition up for 20 years. And so now we have these dinners with all the women senators. And what they do is we get to know each other as people. We get to know each other as friends, as women, as daughters, as sisters, as mothers, as wives. And we care about each other. So it's not surprising that every bill I've ever passed in Congress, I have had a strong Republican woman helping me get it done. So it was Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and Olympia Snowe who were going into the cloakroom saying, why aren't we standing with first responders when I passed the 9/11 health bill? It was Susan Collins who led the charge on Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal and made sure we had the 7 Republican votes we needed. In sexual assault in the military, 20 out of 20 women agreed on 9 out of 10 reforms. It was only the one reform that 17 out of 20 women agreed on. So what we see is that women have this often, it's not always, often have this disposition that they want to find common ground. They want to build consensus. They want something done. And it's one of the reasons why politically I've worked so hard to get more women elected. I want more women who want to cross party lines to be practical, get things done, find the things we agree on, and move from there, because I think that's often how we're built. And I think if we had 51% of women in Congress, we certainly wouldn't have wasted the last 2 congressional sessions on whether women should have access to contraception. We would have talked about all the other things we care about, like national security and the economy and everything else. But with 98% of American women having used contraception in their lifetime, it would be off the table. So that is the difference. I think that women's voices are different and unique, and they have a different style of working, and that would be very good for government if we had more of them. Last question. It's all you.
The pressure of being the last question. I actually know Annie and Andrea, the 2 people that you were talking about, who are survivors of sexual assault on college campus, and I also am. And one of the reasons I'm taking a semester off from my college in DC is so that I don't have to be with my rapist on campus every single day, and they can graduate and I can come back and be a successful student with them not being there. So I wanted to ask you, for the survivors on college campuses and just survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence in general who aren't as brave to come forward like that, what would you say to them so that they would be as brave to come forward and tell their stories and step up and inspire and empower them?
Well, the most important thing they need is to get whatever support they feel they need. So telling a trusted person, so that if they need any kind of support, whether it's counseling, whether it's health care, whether it's anything, guidance, advice, they need to get the support they need, and then they should do what they want to do, because not every woman is going to want to report it to her school, not everyone's going to want to report it to law enforcement. They have to make their own decisions. But what I found is when women are empowered and know their options, when they really know the lay of the land and what it would look like and how could you hold your perpetrator accountable, then they can make an informed decision. And oftentimes they do pursue the cases. It is very empowering to stand up. This one woman named Emma, raped at Columbia. Nothing was done in her case. She is now protesting by carrying a mattress on her back all around Columbia to show her school the burdens she's carrying because they didn't address her rape. And she is speaking truth to power. She stood up in front of 100 cameras and told her story because she demanded some kind of justice. And she's empowered. And so sometimes it makes a difference to be able to stand up to fight for yourself, because you're controlling what's happening. And so each woman will make her own, each woman or man will make their own judgment about what's best for them. And I'm here to work very hard to be their voice and to demand what's right and demand the kind of accountability that we don't have today. And that's what I feel very blessed that I get to do. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.